Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Alastair, Stewart and Tibor Laczko, who are both consultants with us at URM and QSAs. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today we're going to be talking about scoping and the PCI DSS. So my first question for you guys is, when does an organisation stop being just a merchant and become a PCI DSS service provider?
When it starts to provide services.
Obvious answer, yeah. I mean, it's if you're a merchant, you're taking payments for yourself. If you're a service provider, you're involved in payments for other businesses as well, or on the side of your own payments. So when you're involved in some kind of protecting some kind of card data, but you're not actually the merchant, at that point you're going to become some kind of service provider, depending on what service it is you're providing.
Right. So yeah, for example, I don't know, an entity, a merchant selling tickets or selling services for something online is a merchant. The company who provides that online payment platform is a service provider. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion is, like, and I think what's your saying, Alistair, is like follow the money.
Yes.
So yeah. So that's sort of like decides which, like, if you get the money instantly for your goods or services, then you're a merchant.
Yeah.
And if not, then you're probably more than likely a service provider.
The money has to leave a customer's card and it hits a bank account somewhere. Whichever organization is responsible for that account, they're the merchant. Anybody else is going to be a service provider.
Again, sometimes confusion is sometimes service providers accept payments on their own merchant ID.
Mm-hmm.
And they send like a lump sum amount once a week, once a month, whatever the agreement is. But again, where does the money go?
Yeah.
I guess that's the golden rule.
Yeah. You get some service providers will accept the money on your behalf when they become the merchant. Then you also get some service providers that will accept payments for the services they provide to their merchants, and so they become both. They're a service provider and a merchant for selling their own services. So it does get confusing because you can be both or one, or you can move from one to the other, but follow the money, you should find it.
Yeah.
And would you say the distinction's based mainly on transaction volume, technical architecture, contractual role, or the ability to affect the security of cardholder data?
All of the above?
Yeah. The rule tells you that you're going to say that it if you're not actually receiving the money into your corporate bank account, then you're going to be a service provider for something. It could be architecture, it could be your services, it could be periphery services, it could be support. You're going to be a service provider for something if you're not getting the money from the end consumer buying the product.
Yeah, I guess the rule tells you, again, whether you're a service provider, merchant, which category you're in. Your architecture tells, in a good environment, tells you what's in scope for PCI. And the ability to impact the security of the cardholder data, again, that's sort of like whether you're in scope or out of scope for PCI. In terms of transaction volumes, that's completely unrelated to PCI. It's done by the card brands, not by the SSC, as there's a common misconception. It has nothing to do with PCI. Well, it kind of does. It kind of
does. It determines your risk category, doesn't it? It determines your risk category to the banks, and therefore how you need to be validated and what level of assessment you need. So it determines your risk category, basically.
Yeah.
So where you've already said that some organisations can be both a merchant and a service provider at the same time, how should that be reflected in the PCI DSS assessment?
Two assessments. Two separate assessments. Do one as a merchant and one as a service provider.
Yep.
They'll often overlap because the systems are the same, but there should be two assessments done.
Yeah, the controls, I would say probably 80 to 90% are the same. I guess the difference really is those handful of service provider specific requirements in the standard.
You might also find that you've got bits of your environment that are only in scope for your merchant rather than the services you provide. You might have extra things that you use to provide the service that you don't use for your own merchant environment. So, but yeah, it's 90% the same stuff.
In terms of documentation, the ROC is exactly the same. The format that you will receive from your QSA is exactly the same. However, in terms of an attestation, there's a merchant attestation and there's a service provider attestation. So the distinction will be there. So if you're a merchant, for your acquirer, you provide your, well, again, we're only talking about level 1 merchants here. For an attestation, you provide your merchant AOC, and if you're a service provider to your merchants or your customers, you just provide your service provider attestation.
What are the most common mistakes you see organizations make when deciding whether they're a merchant, a service provider, or both?
Okay, so the next 2 hours, we're going to be more stories of trying to convince customers. I guess the most common that I see is, I don't have access to pen. We don't see pen. We're out of scope. There's nothing we need. We're responsible for PCI. It's about protecting cardholder data. I don't see cardholder data. Goodbye. And then your tug of war starts.
Yeah, because it's not just about protecting the card data. It is about protecting card data, but systems that protect the card data don't necessarily have to contain the card data themselves in order to protect it. And so you end up in discussions about, well, actually, you're responsible for these components that protect the card data, even though there's no card data in them. So you have to be a service provider because you're responsible for some in-scope components. And that's where we get our discussions, is service providers believing they shouldn't be in scope because they don't have cardholder data.
And the more prevalent this, I think, is for like hosting providers or software development companies. And I think everybody is very familiar with, because I think all QSAs are shining from the roof about, like, if you store, process, or transmit cardholder data, you're in scope for PCI. But the second portion of that sentence is, and if you have the ability to impact the security of the cardholder data, is sort of like, I have not heard that. So it's
people don't hear that bit.
People very conveniently kind of disregard that portion of that sentence.
Yeah, it is where, and we spend a lot of our time discussing with, especially niche service providers, like you say, software developers. They go, well, I just write the code. Yeah, but that still protects the data as it transfers the data around. So they still end up in scope. And I think once they realize they're in scope, you tend to talk to them about what requirements actually apply. And for those small niche service providers, it's a very small number of requirements that actually end up applying. And they go, oh, we can do that. It's easy. It's because they see 270 odd requirements and they panic and go, I don't want to do that. And so once it's clear what's actually being done, it's usually a lot easier.
Yeah, PCI is I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's a good standard that you can narrow it down to, so what's applicable, what's not applicable. And us assessors have the ability to actually individually, each requirement is whatever environment we're assessing, is it actually applicable to this environment? And we have the ability to say no and just mark this as not applicable. So as you said,
I was explaining it to a client the other day that the standard is designed to cover all possible scenarios of payment processes. It covers every possible component that could be in scope, from people to virtual machines to containers to software platforms. It covers everything. So all the requirements are there to cover everything. So not all requirements apply to all components. Once you define what components are in scope, you can then go, well, actually, all these requirements are not applicable to this type of component. So nobody has to do all the requirements all of the time. It just doesn't work like that. Yeah, there might be a handful of the big boys who are doing all the requirements, but that's different kind of fish, I guess.
So how should we scope a software as a service provider that only uses hosted payment fields or iframes from a payment service provider?
Separating the cardholder data from the payment impacting environment, I think, would be my approach.
Yeah, you're going to want to go, well, the iframes are the bit that's the payment service provider. Where are those iframes sitting? Where are the hosted payment fields sitting? And start your scoping from there, because those are the bits you're worried about securing. They're the ones where if you compromise that iframe, you can muck about with the payment page inside or the link to the payment page. And so you start from there and work your way outwards as to what affects the security of those bits of the environment.
Yeah, but there's with any SaaS provider, there's a lot of stuff that's coming into scope. The environment itself, the web servers, the code, whether it's cloud hosting, the API integration, but there, I guess, like who's responsible for the payment page, the parent page, sorry, because again, I think there's a confusion between what's the parent page and what's the payment page.
Yeah.
And we consider the iframe itself, the iframe integration, as the payment page, and the parent page is where that integration is. But who is responsible for the parent page? What sort of scripts are running on it? So there's still a lot of that comes into scope that you need to consider when you're scoping one of these platforms.
But the other thing you'll also find with these platforms is because they're software as a service, because of the environment they sit in, they may then offload a lot of that to the actual hosting provider, whoever's hosting. So service providers can have their own service providers, who can have their own service providers, and so on down the chain. So the actual provider of the software may just be doing development. All the actual infrastructure may be managed by a third party, in which case they're another service provider down the chain. So
yeah, it's a nice, big, beautiful daisy chain.
Yeah, and you just
they're disconnected by AOCs.
yeah, you hope, at least.
So does using Stripe elements, Adyen components, WorldPay hosted fields, or a similar integration automatically keep the platform provider out of PCI DSS scope?
No, nothing ever automatically keeps you out of scope. Nothing. No. It just doesn't. Consider yourself in scope until told otherwise. Let's do it that way around, shall we?
That's a really good approach. Yes, you are in scope. The level of how much you're in scope may differ. Yes. If you have anything to do with payment, you're 99.9% in scope in one way or another. Yeah. And again, these integrations are great. And this is where the whole e-commerce industry is heading to, or already there, not heading to. Just offload as much responsibility as you can. The less you're responsible for, the easier is your compliance.
Yeah, these drop-in components or hosted fields these days, you can just silently slip them into your own look and feel web page. The parent page looks the way you want it to, and it just collects all the data. They can do repeat transactioning, they can do subscription models, they can do everything for you. They're the experts, let them do the heavy lifting. It's much easier that way.
And many of these platforms, if you're a merchant, let's say level 4 to level 3 merchants, many of these service providers have their own merchant management program. So you don't actually have to worry about doing your own, like you don't need to, as a level 3 or 4 merchant, you don't need to hire a QSA anyway. But how you report on your compliance annually, it's much easier because there's a merchant management portal, you log in, and they just teed up all the questions that you need to answer. And then, there's a lot of, they're not cheap, but there's a lot comes with the service, I believe.
Yeah, a lot of them, Stripe and that, they then become your acquiring bank. So you're reporting compliance to them, but you're taking their service. They already know a lot of what you're doing. So it makes the whole process a lot easier. You end up reporting compliance to them and using their portal to just answer a few questions, submit a few policies and stuff. It makes it so much easier for those smaller merchants to comply.
Where is the line between a merchant's e-commerce website and a service provider's payment impacting platform?
I'm going to do it depends. Can we go with it depends? is that the good
one?
Never
always,
we never used that before.
You're going to say depends on what type of service you're taking from the platform, whether it's iframe, whether it's redirect, whether it's form, silent order post, or JavaScript form. The line will be drawn in a different place depending on what type of integration you're using. Could even be full API integration, in which case there's card data going through your merchant's website, in which case it's going to be everything in scope. I don't see that very often these days, but it could be there.
So if a third-party platform hosts the parent payment page, but the payment fields are loaded directly from the payment service provider, what PCI DSS responsibilities usually remain with the platform provider?
I kind of feel like I should be providing a quote for an answer to that question.
Quite specific, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Third party hosts the parent page, and the payment service provider has fields. So the actual merchant doesn't do anything other than give the details to the third-party platform. Yeah. So as a merchant, you've got a third party.
But hang on, we're talking about the platform provider. We're talking about the service provider, not the merchant. So yes, the merchant, as you said, does nothing basically, taking payments and hopefully get a lot of money. The service provider is like it's still in control of the environment, the platform.
Yeah.
Even the integration, I believe, because the API is their responsibility with the chosen
it depends
payment
on
provider.
Yeah, it depends on exactly how they're doing it. But as a merchant, you won't know how they're doing it behind the scenes because you'll simply be employing the platform to do it all for you, the e-commerce platform, and you'll be essentially out offloading all your PCI DSS requirements to them as a service provider. They will then subsequently offload to payment providers or hosted payment pages beyond you, but you won't see that. You won't know that. So the detail in that will become where the responsibility is divided between the platform and the further on providers.
But the platform could actually provide everything.
Could do.
So they may have like either more than likely a cloud-based platform. So they're responsible for everything from build for network security controls to patching, AV, antivirus if applicable, logging, everything. So technically the entire standard. Pretty much these providers are, remember we talked about earlier that few organizations have the entire standard covered.
Yeah.
These organizations are usually those because they provide services to a wide variety of merchants with different needs, I guess. So they're just covering all bases.
They'll often be storing card details for the repeat transactions as well, so they'll be subject to all those requirements.
How should client-side scripts, tag managers, analytics tools, and marketing pixels affect scoping for e-commerce environments?
It's probably a SAC-A type thing, even though the requirement has been taken out and become an eligibility criteria. Scripts on the payment page are a serious security concern. I think we can all agree.
But if you're I come back to the definition we talked about earlier about the difference between a parent page and a payment page.
Right.
If this stuff is on the parent page, it comes into scope if it can affect the hosted fields that actually are the payment page inside that parent page. Otherwise, they're not going to be in scope of PCI DSS. It depends on what they can interact with on the parent page.
If they can read, modify, or redirect, overlay, or interfere with the payment page, then they're in scope.
What makes requirement 6.4.3 and requirement 11.6.1 particularly important for modern e-commerce scoping?
It's exactly the same thing we're just talking about, isn't
it? Pretty much, with the exception of, I guess the attention really, well, we didn't say it before, but it's not only what happens on the server side, on the service provider side, but what actually happens on the client side. So the customer, what happens to the customer browser when they are trying, their basket or they're going through their payment steps, because these scripts can modify what the customer actually sees.
Yes, because those scripts will all be there at runtime on the browser, and so you need to know what they're doing and where they are located and what they can interact with. And so scoping them is looking at what they do. Basically, you have to look at them. But then the standard has requirements. You should have inventories of those scripts and justifications for what they all are and what they do. That's part of the requirements, is to know what they are and what they're doing.
We can also almost can say that the customer's browser is in scope now.
Almost. It's heading that way, isn't it? You don't want it to, but it is looking that way.
Yeah. Although, I'd like to see that part when we're going to go to the individual customer's web browser and just
you just get to a situation where if you try and connect with an out-of-date browser, the website bounces you out and you can't buy anything. That's what it'll be.
You're right.
So what are some examples of systems that are not in the CDE but are still security impacting and therefore in PCI DSS scope?
Can you reel them from memory from the standard?
Security impacting can be, from I don't know, code repositories to, I don't know, NTP or vulnerability scanner. The list is endless, really.
This is endless. Things that are relevant in this day and age: containers. If you're doing containerized apps, containers are in scope. Kubernetes containers, that kind of stuff. DNS, if you're doing your own DNS, domain name resolution servers. Web redirection, virtualized switches, virtual firewalls, that kind of stuff. Don't discard virtual components.
Web application firewalls.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you're virtualizing hypervisors or whatever's doing the actual virtualization, that can affect the security. So
multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Again, we just talked about scripts. Whatever monitoring your script is usually not sitting in your CDE, somewhere outside of it, but it has a very important role.
Your security monitoring systems, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the client's environment. And again, we go back to depends, but there's quite a lot. And I recently had a client who we went through a scoping exercise and we sort of went hours and hours and explained the, it's category 1, category 2. Category 1, that store processor, that's your CDE system. Category 2 is the security impacting one. And once we actually walked them through of this, and they went away and they came back with a ginormous list, and they were like, oh my God, we didn't know that this much would be in scope for PCI. So there's a lot of stuff you just don't consider,
Yeah. And that's the point when you go, okay, let's work out how we can de-scope a lot of this stuff. Let's work out how we can deal with it. You just ask yourself the question, if I compromise this system, could I compromise the card data system? If the answer is yes, then it's in scope. Just imagining that scenario.
I don't know. My biggest argument, well, not biggest arguments, but like some people, the hardest for them to, like, for example, code repositories, right? So code doesn't store cardholder data. It's just GitHub. It's sitting there. Why would that be in scope? Because the code that is running or the code that you develop is there, and it may, running on your web server, running your shopping cart, running whatever. And that, obviously it's in scope.
Especially with automated pipelines these days, that code gets automatically pulled down and run by the web server. And so if it gets edited or changed in a malicious way, it's going to be automated and pulled down, and off it goes.
So what happens when a merchant relies on a third-party provider that does not have a PCI DSS attestation with compliance, or AOC?
Change providers, quick. Move to another one.
Yes, exactly. Find another one. There's plenty efficiency.
Let's give something a bit more practical on that. You have to work with them to essentially get them compliant for the service they provide to you. So you need to work out what service they provide, where that falls under your PCI DSS requirements, and therefore get them to acknowledge their responsibility to meet those requirements and evidence how they're meeting them. So you kind of have to audit them essentially to the requirements in question.
You need to pull them into your assessment or your client's assessment. So when you can't, tell them that you need to become PCI compliant. Well, you can, but I guess it depends on how big of a business it is that the service provider provides for you, but are they willing to go through it? But if not, I have a client right now. Their hosting provider is not PCI compliant, but they're very happy to be involved in the assessment. So they're made time aside through the gap analysis portion of the assessment or the engagement. They were involved, they provided answers, they provided response, they provided evidence. So they don't have to be PCI compliant. It makes things easier, obviously. But I think it's more of like what I'm experiencing now with this client is more of the exception than the rule, because I think most service providers who are not PCI compliant, they're not PCI compliant for a reason. And they're not very forthcoming, or they're not,
Yeah, it's that lack of understanding of what it involves to be compliant and how much effort it is to get compliant that scares a lot of providers off. So it can be a challenging conversation sometimes.
So can a merchant still complete SAQA if one of the payment impacting service providers cannot evidence PCI DSS compliance?
Possibly.
Yes.
It depends on of what service are we talking about. If it's the payment processing side of things, no, because one of the eligibility criteria for SAQA is that you have to outsource, or the entity has to outsource all payment related services to a PCI compliant service provider, but it doesn't talk about hosting, and then that's what we talked about earlier.
So it's you can't, when it comes to the payment stuff, you can't then, doing a self-assessment, you can't include them in your self-assessment, because that's not how that works like we could do for the full assessment. So because the criteria are quite specific on that all the payment stuff has to be outsourced to a compliant provider, they must be compliant in order for that to be the case.
But the good news is, I think all payment providers are PCI compliant. I don't know if you could find one that is actually not PCI compliant.
Maybe a payment facilitator or a payment gateway might have slipped through the net, but I doubt it. Even then, the bank's going to be knocking on their door pretty quick.
Yeah. Or if they do it, they must be so insignificant. A service provider threshold is so low, 300,000 transactions, right? And if you don't, I don't see any business being viable if you don't process 300,000 transactions annually, or even 600 if you break it down to card brands. I think we would be hard pressed to find a payment provider that is not PCI compliant.
How should acquirers, payment facilitators, independent software vendors, marketplaces, and managed service providers be treated differently in scoping discussions?
I mean, apart from acquirers, none of them really should be treated differently. They're all just service providers, essentially. You should treat them all the same. Acquirers are not service providers. Acquirers are the people you report your compliance to. So if you go asking an acquirer for their compliance, they might have some choice words to say if you ask about their compliance. But everybody else, just treat them the same. They're all service providers. It just depends on the service they provide.
I think that's the deciding what services are provided and how they fit in, like which requirement of the 270 odd requirements are applicable to that particular service. This is where scoping comes in.
So where our scoping workshops, reasonably priced, efficient scoping workshops come in.
Speaking of scoping workshops, what are some practical questions a QSA should ask early in a scoping workshop to uncover hidden service provider responsibilities?
Are you hiding anything from us? Is that a good question?
Are you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So happy.
The areas I always poke around when I'm doing scoping workshops, both merchants and for service providers, is to poke around the unusual stuff, right? Most businesses are very familiar with their payment process. We take payments over the phone, we do this, we use that software because they do it all the time. But where you've got sort of odd out-of-band transactions that don't fit standard processes, refunds, or where somebody rings up and needs help, or they send an email in because they can't be bothered and stuff. So it's those obscure ones. You talk to the customer service people or the other people in the business and go, are there any other instances where you do a payment that's not standard? And those are the way you should dig. That's where you'll find your issues.
I mean, how many times, finance department taking payments over the phone, and entering it to an acquirer portal, like a virtual terminal, and whenever the internet is down, they can't get connected or something, they just write down the card numbers on a piece of paper with the expiration date, everything, and then they're going to process it like offline, or when the connection is back. So all of this, like, people, again, they don't do this maliciously. They just don't see this as a risk.
You get the people on the other end of those help chatbots. You've got maybe an elderly person who's not familiar with websites using a website to make a payment. The chatbot pops up and says, hello, can you help me? The customer might go, oh, here's my card details. Can you make the payment for me? And then the person at the other end receives it, and then they go and manually process it in some way. This is a sort of unusual route for a transaction to take. It's that where you're going to find your scope explodes, when they're just trying to help the customer. And that's necessarily the right thing to do. They go, it's not malicious, they're just trying to help the customer make the payment. And then suddenly they've exploded the scope to cover nearly everything.
Yeah. Same thing happens often, I think, with card present transactions sometimes,
Yep.
when it's like there's a SIM card in the terminal and the connection's down. It's like, oh yeah, I'll process it later. It's fine. Yeah,
don't do that. Don't ever do that.
Yeah.
Basically, just don't write down a
don't.
price. It's just a no.
You don't. Yeah. Again, we just go back to the age-old mantra. It's just like, if you don't have to store it, don't. And by writing it down, you're actually storing it.
Yeah.
In hard copy format, which is a lot of people overlook it, I think. Interesting. Recently, I had a client who the terminals, the POI terminals, the merchant copy receipt contained a full 16-digit number. Mm-hmm. And I was under, this happened maybe 15 years ago, very often.
Yeah.
But it's been a very long time since I kind of checking it out of just habit, really. But it's been a very, very long time since I found it. And the response was that they got a software upgrade on the terminals, and apparently they were not even aware of it. So apparently a flag changed somewhere in the program. So again, this is one of those things that you don't expect it, but it could be there. Right?
It used to be a configurable option that was default printed, and you had to go in and switch it off manually when you set up. These days, I'd say it's never been on default in anything I've come across in the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, same here, until a couple of weeks ago.
Well, that's one extra place to look then.
No. Which, I don't know. Again, they said it was a software issue. It's outside of their control. It's not them who updated the software, which kind of made me think that how many other terminals this software was updated on.
Yeah, keep an eye on that make and model specifically. Yeah.
So finally, what advice would you give to organisations before they select their SAQ type or assume they qualify for a reduced PCI DSS scope?
Contact one of our account managers, get us to give you a quote. Sorry.
What a way to plug it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Just plug. No.
I think don't select the SAC first. Just understand your payment first, and then that will lead you to which self-assessment questionnaire should you choose. But I wholeheartedly agree. You should, if there's any confusion, because these documents, for somebody who's not working with payment, who's like a finance person, compliance, governance, whoever, all of a sudden sees this self-assessment questionnaire, even like a SAC-A, like the easiest or the simplest one, so to speak, it can be very daunting, all the language, all whatever. So yeah, I would advise, if there's any ambiguity, I would advise to reach out to a QSA and just get your reaching out to a QSA doesn't mean that they need to do it for you. They can just explain it to you. If you're in a level 3, level 4, 432 merchant or level 2 service provider, you're entitled to do it for yourself, but have some professional context, I think, would help.
Yeah, to explain, like you said, the terminology is the key one, because PCI SSC, the council, is quite adept at taking industry terminology and repurposing it to mean something completely different within the standard. They have a habit of reusing words that mean different things in different ways, and so understanding that terminology can be key. The other thing I would say is, even if you do understand it and you've gone through it, you've defined your scope, you've looked at your scope, and you've chosen your self-assessment questionnaire, the one thing to fall back on is that even the council says, even though you've chosen the questionnaire, all the requirements are technically still applicable. because you should look at the requirements that are not on that SAQ. And if any of them look like they might apply, you could be looking at the wrong SAQ. So you can look outside your SAQ to validate that you've got the correct one as a sort of back check on choosing the correct one.
What a way to scare the bejesus out of everyone. Thanks.
Sorry.
I'm just going to do a SAC P2PE, but maybe the entire standard is applicable.
No, not the entire standard, but do look just to make sure, because those eligibility criteria, they're worded in interesting ways sometimes, let's be honest.
Very true. Yeah.
I'm sure lawyers will get rich on some of the ways they've defined eligibility criteria.
Yeah, I guess our final word would be like, do not, if you have limited exposure or no exposure at all to cardholder data, don't think you're out of scope for PCI. There's many, 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 many ways that you could still be in scope for PCI.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, guys. If any of our listeners want to ask Tibor and Alastair a question, you can either follow the link in the description to this episode, or you can just pop your question in the comments. Thank you again for your time, guys, and thank you everyone for listening today. We will see you next time. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.